the churches have lots of young people with energy. On the whole, churches tend to be much younger age-wise.
Yeah.
People are sharing the gospel, they're coming to faith in Christ. And then also what we've discovered is that some people have like dreams and visions of Jesus. And so they are waiting for somebody to come and share the gospel with them.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Postcards from Antioch, a training and discipleship podcast by Barton Church. My name's James. Some of you may be familiar with me, having seen me or heard me before. This is Peter, who you may also be familiar with because he recorded a podcast with us last season on cross-cultural mission. Peter's an elder at our church and he worked for the movement of African national initiatives. Is
That's
that right?
Correct, James. You
Good.
got it right.
Yeah, I was trying to memorize it. And Peter did such a good job last time. I thought, let's have him back. And no one stopped me from asking him. So, and he unfortunately for him, couldn't say no quickly enough. I said yes. So thanks for joining us again, Peter. So Postcards from Antioch is the podcast. You've travelled a lot with your role and your various roles over the years. I suppose, have you ever sent a postcard from a strange place or received a postcard from a strange place that you can think of?
Yes, I've always done that before the days of social media.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
it's so much easier to send a WhatsApp message.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've sent postcards in the past. I remember buying a postcard from Moldova
Okay.
in Europe, which was a very interesting country to visit a few years back.
Yes.
And
Quite
that was
small as well.
Very small,
Yeah.
eye-opening.
Yeah.
I travelled on a horse-drawn cart, which was very interesting. So I hadn't done that for a long time.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you've just made me think maybe we should change the podcast to WhatsApps from Antioch or something, or texts from Antioch. Move with the times. That's what they tell me. So, well, having Peter back, and he's got lots of experience, lots of wisdom. And I just wanted to give him, or we just wanted to give him the opportunity to maybe share some stories. And listen and see what God is saying to you through the stories. You know, there's no particular theme or agenda for this session. It's to take advantage of the fact that we've got someone with us who has a lot to contribute, I think, to our own growth. So, Peter, I wondered, have you got, I'm sure you have, otherwise we're in trouble, but have you got any particularly encouraging or interesting stories that you'd like to share about mission or about your work or anything that you thought, no, this would be a good thing to talk about?
Well, first of all, thank you, James. It's good to be here, and welcome to all those who are watching and listening from home or wherever you are. I think I do have several stories, and the first one that comes to mind is something that just happened recently in my last trip. I spent 3.5 weeks in Kenya, and what really struck me is the way churches and Christian organizations and student movements begin the year, just like we do at Barton. They started it in prayer.
Yeah.
And churches were doing either 1, 2, 3, or even 4 weeks of prayer and fasting for this month of January. So that was really encouraging to see how groups come together and just intentionally begin the year dedicating it to God in prayer. But what struck me most about it is how widespread it was across the country. Every place I went to, every person I met, every church I had a chance to visit over that period. We're going through that same season, which is probably more than I've seen in the past in terms of where people are at. And to me, that was really reassuring that for followers of Jesus, that's a good way to start the year.
Yeah.
And all of them were actually also praying for mission, which is also encouraging because that's the sort of space I am in. And we've been working with churches for a long time, trying to motivate them and encourage them for mission, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. So to me, that was really reassuring.
Yeah.
And just last Sunday, actually, the Sunday before this last one, in one of the churches, they had 8 sort of missionaries who had just spent 9 months in preparation training in one of the mission preparation camps in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 8 people from other African countries. And so they were going back to their home countries
Yeah.
to begin to think about going to serve in particular contexts. So that, to me, was really, really exciting to see that there are people who are desirous to be engaged, both in terms of seeking God in prayer, but also going cross-culturally. And within that time, they had learned some of the Kenyan languages just by being there. So people do pick up languages quite quickly
Yes.
as they prepare to go
Yeah.
wherever they're going. So that was sort of one of the first stories that's quite new and relevant.
Yeah.
It may not all sound
Yeah.
spectacular, but it's really, really refreshing to see people who are seeking God in prayer, and also for the way people are getting answers to prayer, not just individual, but corporately. So that's my kind of first story that I thought I'll start with.
That's a good one. So is Kenya a country you would say that trains missionaries? Is that part
Kenya
of its role?
is one of
Yeah.
several countries where the church is relatively mature or
Yeah.
strong. And so it's a good location to train missionaries, because part of the training is some practical work. But Kenya has large chunks of the country, especially to the north and the northeast, that are dominated by other religions. So it's a good place for short-term trips to practice what you're learning. And yet there are parts of Kenya that has strong churches. It has quite a bit of a mix. So because of that, it's a good training ground.
Yeah.
And it's also relatively safe, generally speaking, compared to some of the other places where people go. So it's a good place to prepare people. Start easy before you go to some of the harder countries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. Anything else? Come on, I'll soak it all up and I'll ask questions.
Okay. Yes. I think it's so interesting when you asked what sort of some stories to tell. I think just towards the end of last year, one of my areas of focus for the last 6 or 7 years was to get churches in sub-Saharan Africa excited and engaged with reaching the northern part of Africa that is mostly Islamic.
Yeah.
And it's been slow and it's had many challenges. We've had trips there that we've been forced to abandon for security reasons, and so on and so forth. But over this last year, we had one of the most fulfilling trips to one of the countries. And we had a chance to take a group of people who are eager to see what's happening there. But we also had a chance to meet with some of the local or national believers from the North African countries who travel from 4 countries to be in one place. And the thing that struck me most about them is how Christians are living out their faith in very difficult contexts. Of course, we have those who have moved from their countries to go and sort of share the good news of Jesus in these North African countries. But it's the North Africans themselves who have come to faith and are standing for Christ or living for Christ in places where it's really challenging. So, for instance, some of the people, we heard their stories, we find that when they started believing, this is more than 10 years ago, their families kicked them out. And so for 10 years, they haven't met either their parents or some of their close relatives. One brother had a chance after a few years to go back and visit his family. Suddenly they turned very warm and said, "Oh, you need to come back and see us. What's going on? Are you still following Jesus?" And so he went. Little did he know that they were going to poison him.
Okay.
So they served him food and poisoned him. He was really sick, but he survived. So stories like that where you thought things were turning around, but it seemed to just get worse. But the amazing thing, this particular person is so much on fire for Christ. And he spends some time praying, and they have a local church fellowship that meets secretly. but he travels. It's like God speaks to him and he travels to different cities, shares the gospel with people, and comes back and reports what's happening. And now with social media, he's able to share with us. They asked us to support them in prayer. So with social media, he sends us a pin of where he is, so we can track his movements as he goes talking to various people. And he sends prayer messages, and we're able to pray for him from a distance,
Yeah.
which is so amazing and wonderful. But it's also challenging to think that people are giving up so much,
Yeah.
living in places of persecution and lots of pain and difficulty, and yet they are so persistent and consistent in terms of sharing their faith with others. And these are just some of many
Yeah.
in each of the
Absolutely.
countries.
Yeah.
Each country is different because, like with the persecutions, they are different. There are those who are persecuted by governments, then there are those who are persecuted by society. And then it's also the religion itself persecuting some. And then for some, it's actually families.
Yeah.
So the government may not bother with what you're doing as long as you keep the peace, but it's the families that make life difficult.
Yeah.
And to look at all these different levels, some of them share that their most challenging point usually is when families reject them, because then you have nowhere else to hide. You see, from governments, you can hide in your families or somewhere in society, but it's the family persecution that
Yeah.
is the hardest to deal with.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think it's just wonderful to see how the gospel is bearing fruit in these difficult places. People are sharing the gospel, they're coming to faith in Christ. And then also what we've discovered is that some people have like dreams and visions of Jesus. And so they are waiting for somebody to come and share the gospel with them.
Yeah.
So in more than one occasion, we've had people who you think they're so far from anywhere. You meet them either in a taxi or in the streets, and you just get chatting because these are very relational societies. People just chat to each other. And especially when you're a stranger, they want to know where you come from, what you do. And very quickly, they want to know what religion you are. And if you share that, sometimes you're not sure, is this secret society? They want to trap you.
Yeah.
But as long as you're open and honest, if you share that you're a follower of Jesus, often they come to, why has it taken you so long to come and share with us this good news? Because I had a dream some months ago, some weeks ago, and I saw that someone was going to come and share this good news of Jesus with me. So these kind of situations bring a bit of encouragement
Yeah.
as people start following Jesus. Of course, the reality is challenging after that, how you continue to sustain it in a place where there's so much persecution.
Yeah.
And where I met a young man who was 32 years old, and he had lost 25 jobs because of his faith in Christ over a period of 8 years. So he was so discouraged
Yeah.
because he thought this was good news. He wanted to follow Christ. Everywhere he went, they know that he's a follower of Jesus. He loses his job. And so these kind of people also need support. So part of our work is how do we find a structure to just encourage them from a distance, sort of outsiders bring encouragement in a way that gives dignity to the national, yet
Yeah.
also affirms their faith.
Have you had any experiences of that where you've met someone who was able to say that they had been encouraged by things that were happening in another, like sort of that by distance?
Yes, I mean, like when we were with them last year, the one thing they asked us, can you set up a prayer group, people we trust, that we can meet once a month and pray on Zoom? And when we went back this past year, they said that has been the thing that has kept them going, because in one of the countries they had a severe earthquake, and they lost everything of their possessions. But it's the prayers of Christians from other countries praying for them, if I understand you correctly,
Yes.
has kept
Yeah,
them
yeah.
going. And they are so eager to meet. Even when the rest of us go to our countries, you get busy with other things.
Yeah.
But they're always there for the Zoom prayer meeting, and they share some of their requests.
Yeah.
And through that, we can stay connected on practical things of life. How is your family? How are your children doing? How is school? What are some of the things we can do? And also some of the people who visit, their churches want to support even if it's small amounts that can be sent just to support, like with the earthquake.
Mm.
Through the earthquake, we were able to see 10 different centers of outreach start as a result of the earthquake by just one couple, husband and wife, who have been making disciples in this very remote village. So there are those kind of exciting stories
Yeah.
of things happening.
It's good, I think, because I mean, we touched on it last time we spoke, but the comparative wealth we have in the West in terms of both material, but just in terms of resources and training and all those things, and yet the comparative poverty some of us feel in our own spiritual lives, like those encounters with God, or that passion, that desire and commitment to make those sacrifices.
It's true. And one thing I find that people value most is relationships. So that sometimes we don't have much we can give ourselves, but they just value relationships or people they can share with their struggles. You know, last time, several of the believers, as they shared about their journey of faith through difficulty, they had a time just to cry. And this, in a culture where men don't cry, is something that really strikes you, that they have a space where they can open up about their struggles and the pain and rejection and feel affirmed. So that's something that money cannot buy. But you're right, they have so much spiritual wealth and strength despite their pain and their struggles. But the other thing that strikes me, that they have a lot of vision, that there are things they want to see and done and accomplished with very little. And they are so resilient as they follow Jesus despite so much obstacle and so much what you think is lack.
Yeah.
So that's another side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I can also bring you a story from a different part of the world, because that's sort of our, we mobilize, or we envision churches in parts where the church is strong, to think of how they can support places where the church is relatively struggling or small. So in Angola, I was in Angola in December, and this is a place where the church is relatively stronger. It's Portuguese speaking, and Portuguese speaking Africa have struggled with lack of resources. So part of my work in this last year has been to encourage and strengthen the 5 Portuguese speaking countries in Africa. So I've got to 3 of them. I have 2 more to cover in the coming year. But it was really, really exciting. First of all, the planning is always a challenge for this conference, because I got invited in May, so we were making the plans for 6 months, and then a week before they decided that it's not going to work for them, when I had all my flight tickets booked, and you buy the cheapest tickets, you can't change. and then they shifted it and asked, are you able to come? And all along, they were moving by faith, even as I was sort of moving by faith. They were moving by faith that they were planning this thing. They didn't have resources, so they moved it by 2 weeks. So it was very frustrating, feeling, if only they knew what they were doing. And somebody even suggested to me that I should not go, just to teach them a lesson. That's not how you do things. But deep within, I felt there's need to go. But when I arrived, I was first of all very humbled by the kind of sacrifices they made to put these meetings together. But it was a meeting that turned out so powerful in terms of church leaders that came to the gathering, people of influence. When they asked the pastors to, of over 100, they had to limit the numbers because of costs, because they were meeting the costs of the venue, and so they couldn't have everyone come. But when they asked the denominational leaders to stand, it's like half of them were leading denominations, leave alone just one church. So the leader even asked again, I'm saying denominational leaders, and actually they were denominational leaders, so people of influence. But the atmosphere was great. It was a time when they came together and made a commitment that we may not have much, but we are going to start getting engaged in mission. And as a result, they have made a follow-up meeting where they're going to have more people come.
Okay.
So it's progress in terms of excitement and what God is doing.
Yeah.
But also you see the places where the church is thriving, even within, Angola is an interesting country. It has oil. You know, diesel is 20p a liter.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I was wishing that there's a way I could just fill
That's
up
right. Fill up.
and carry it to the UK, because petrol and diesel,
Yeah.
petrol is even cheap. I think it's 13p a
Yeah.
liter. So it's something ridiculous like that. So they produce oil. The capital city looks very expensive. I mean, there are flats there that, £100,000,
Yeah.
a small flat, and just things like that. But you drive 10 minutes out of the center of the city, you see levels of poverty. So the gaps are huge.
Yeah.
And then also I discovered that they seem to have a lot of people who are deaf
Okay.
as a country. I think it's to do with the landmines or something to do with
Yeah.
the terrain. So right from the airport, lots of people who are looking for money, and also lots of people with disability, which they have not been able to deal with for whatever reason. So it's a place of contrasts, affluence and poverty side by side. And that's typical of African countries. But
Yeah.
with Angola, I think it's really magnified. As a country that is really wealthy in terms of oil, but the masses. And yet a lot of the churches are in places where it's a poorer community. But they have hundreds and hundreds of members,
Yeah.
and very lively and wanting to do things.
Yeah.
So again, that's another side of things where people want to be involved. They want to start engaging in mission. They want to start crossing boundaries, and they say, we will go. Come and train
Yeah.
us and tell us what to do. We want to be involved. So that's the side of thing that sort of excites those of us who are
absolutely.
mobilizing for mission, to see that how God can move, even if it's a few of them, begin to move and cross boundaries. And the way they go, often they go as small business people, traders.
Yes. Okay.
So
Yeah.
they can set up their small businesses of trading, buying and selling, and sharing the gospel as they go. So that's how the gospel often moves in these kind of places, through
Yeah.
marketplaces, Christians just sharing their faith, and that having an impact to transform communities.
Fantastic. Do you feel like things have changed a lot in, say, the African nations in terms of mission in the past 5 years or so? 10 years maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's changed. I mean, certainly in the last 40 years, African countries have caught the vision for mission, and that's exciting, especially a country like Nigeria, Ghana. For Kenya, maybe the last 20 years. A few other countries, the last 5 to 10 years. Ethiopia is unique because they caught the mission. They just were doing mission without realizing it was mission. Were taking workers to neighboring countries that were Islamic, and they were just doing it out of obedience, until outsiders told that this is actually mission. So they didn't realize that they were actually doing it. And they have some of the larger in terms of commitments. But I think with the African continent, it's interesting with the younger generation. Africa, probably 70% of Africans are under 35. So it's a very young population, and 60% are below 25. So you find that with the younger generation, they are so connected to that age group, especially when you come to teenagers and people in their 20s. They're very connected to people in the Western world in terms of ideology. So you find that there's a shift going on in the African continent from the way African cultures and traditions used to operate, where the younger generation are very much connected to their age groups in the Western society, where secularism and other ideologies are predominant. So you find that, I think the challenge that we are seeing in the churches in Africa now is, how do you become relevant to the younger generation?
The same struggle.
It's the same struggle.
West,
yes. But I think with the younger people, the gap is so much larger in Africa, where through social media and technology, they have been able to connect very quickly to some of the struggles. So I think that's going to be one of the issues, how that is going to be overcome in a place where family and social connections are big, and yet the younger generation are becoming more individualistic. So that's likely to be a challenge. But in terms of the Christian faith, I see that Africa has so much life still. The churches have lots of young people with energy, On the whole, churches tend to be much younger age-wise
Yeah.
compared to here in Europe, which is positive for the future. That
Yeah.
we have potential for lots of younger people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could be a case where it's the African churches that are reaching our young people.
Yes, it could be the case, but we pray and we hope and see, because the thing with God is that God works with people who are available.
Yeah.
It's not so. It's very hard to decide this group of people will be the ones who will do it. God looks for, in every society, there are people whose hearts are tuned towards God. And I think that's where, when it comes to mission, the significant thing I see at this point is that mission is from everywhere to everywhere. So in every pocket of every society, in every nation, there is a remnant of people whom God is stirring their hearts to be involved in mission.
Yeah.
Even in the West, where Christianity seems to be in decline, I think there's a remnant of people who are being stirred up towards mission.
Yeah.
But because of the cross-pollination and sharing of information across societies, we may help each other to do that last bit.
Yeah.
Where sometimes people will listen to someone from another culture just because it's less threatening.
Yeah.
So that may be a bonus,
Yeah.
especially because Africans also migrate more than any other people.
Yeah.
We have a lot of young people looking to come to Western countries, and maybe they'll bring a different kind of enthusiasm and skill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also music, which is a big thing with Africans. Music is very much at the top of in church life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter. That's really some really good, encouraging thoughts. Also, I feel like there's things that hopefully you at home might feel challenged by, or just to pray about, or just to be more informed about the situation, particularly in Africa. But these kind of things are happening all over the world. And as Peter's rightly said, God is always at work in every country, every place, reaching people, using people who have nothing but their availability, and that includes us in the West as well. So thank you very much, Peter, for sharing, and thank you very much for tuning in, those of you who have, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime on the next Postcards from Antioch. Goodbye.